live streams that we are broadcasting on. We are live here with Zack, Leonard. We're Leonard. Sorry, man, I'm going to mess that up. I know I am. Leonard. And we are talking product development and all kinds of other fun things. If you haven't joined us before, you can do so live in our Zoom meeting, sellerroundtable.com/live. Join us live, then you can ask us or Zack questions as we do this. If not, you get to be a spectator on one of these live streaming services, which is fine as well. But if you would like to join and interact with us, please do so now. We're about to get started. Yippee! Yay! All right, let's record. If it will let me. Here we go. Record to computer. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Andy Arnott with
Amy Weiss.
And this is Seller Roundtable number 96. We got Zack Leonard on. Oh, Zack, I got it. What can I say? Nailed it. Second time's a charm.
There you go. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being on. And Zack is a master of product development, and he's going to take our questions today. And Zack, before we get started, we'd love to hear your backstory, kind of how you got to where you are today in terms of growing up, where you grew up, college, school, hard knocks, any of those kinds of things. We'd love to hear about that.
The whole thing. All right, cool. Well, I grew up in Minneapolis originally. So, Skull Vikings, go Gophers for all you sports fans out there. Then went to school at University of Texas, where I currently still reside in Austin. Then fresh out of school, went into credit risk consulting, and then moved into more of the startup world. Worked at a company called Instacart, headed up the operations in the Texas market, so helped launch Austin, Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, and helped foster partnerships with companies like Whole Foods and HEB. Really saw what explosive unicorn growth looks like, as they continue their journey, hopefully to IPO here in 2021, and then focused on continuing down into heavy operations and the last mile supply chain at a company called Dropoff. We focused on larger scale delivery, but still focusing on that on the supply chain side of things. And that's, I think, what started me on this journey of creating the company that I currently run right now called Gemba, which is a product innovation platform where we help our customers and clients bring awesome products to life. So, the way it works is people have ideas, they put them down on paper or speak them to our team, and we match them with the team of industrial designers, mechanical engineers, or electrical engineers to build the collateral that they need to go have really good and professional conversations with the factories. And then ultimately we have a team overseas in China, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, Turkey, South America, Mexico, kind of all over now, to help them get bids on their products so that they can work with a really high-end factory partner, and then go into full-scale production with them to bring that product finally to their customers. So what brought me there was really just seeing that there was a huge gap for small, mid-sized businesses and entrepreneurs to have that expertise and those resources available to them. There's outlets like agencies, there's outlets like Upwork that can work, but ultimately what you need is a team to build your product. And for resource constrained and time constrained founders and entrepreneurs and small businesses, you need to act fast on your idea, or else someone else might take it. So our goal is to put you with the team in the process that can get your products out there as with the most efficient way, and with a trusted vetted team and network and factory partner that can really work for you and not hinder your growth and hinder the launch of your product.
That's
I love it.
amazing.
So it's like a shortcut.
Yeah, it's kind of a done for you process. And speaking of processes, can we talk about your process? So
Sure.
Can we talk about the product development process that you go through? I think whether or not somebody works with an agency like yours, it's really good to understand the process that you guys go through and apply that to our own businesses. So let's talk about that. What's the process that you go through when you bring on a new client and help them?
Yeah. Well, it really depends on what kind of product they're making. But first, it's matching them with, and then this is where we're less of an agency and more of a platform where we, once they come in and actually put in their RFQ and put in their PRD, or we help them develop those PRDs with whatever expert they need to be matched up with. It then goes into a bidding system where, we have multiple teams that we assign based on the type of product. So let's just, for example, say that you have a idea that you want to make with a cup that has temperature gauge and volume control, right? So that requires some sort of insulation, which is mechanical engineering, and it requires some sort of, electronics. So that's an electrical engineer, and it requires some sort of design. So that's an industrial designer. So the first step is building out the team. That's step one in the process, to make sure that you have the proper people on your team to create the product. The next step, whether it's going to be an agile process or if it's just a streamlined process that you're trying to figure out, the next step is kind of how we take it from there. Agile means you kind of go in these sprints and you kind of tackling as much as you can during those sprints to make sure that they get those products out in the market, or get those products collateral done to a point where, you can start talking to the factories. There might actually also need to loop in the factory earlier in the conversation, being that you might have to source some components if you're trying to go into that type of manufacturing. So it really, really depends on if it's, incremental innovation, what I like to call, just making slight tweaks to things that already are out there, or if we're actually coming out with something novel. If it's something novel, there's a lot more testing, prototyping, et cetera, that goes into it, which can draw up the timeline. And then you have to make decisions along the way of, hey, do I want to do this overseas with the factory partner that I've chosen? Do I want to make the prototypes with the 3D printer? Do I want to make the prototypes in a small batch manufacturer, right? So like all of these things kind of spun out into this crazy process, but ultimately you work in, 1 to 2 month sprints based on where you are, and you try to get everyone on the team aligned so that once you kick the product off, you're kind of running parallel tracks, which ultimately depends on, again, the type of product that you have.
And speaking of type of products, how do you, I'm sure you probably get people coming to you with ideas for products that might seem kind of crazy. Do you have any kind of validation process that you work through with clients in terms of, I'm sure some products are really complicated and you want to keep it minimum viable. You want to make sure that you're developing the components the right way, which I love that you bring in all these different types of engineers and you get everything going. But sometimes you can overdevelop a product and sometimes it can be too much. So is there any kind of validation process that you follow or that you recommend to your clients?
Yeah, so we have, and again, this is going to also depend on where you plan on selling that product, because the behaviors of people who buy things on Amazon is going to be different than behaviors of people who buy things on a Shopify website, right? And so for the Amazon space, we have a proprietary tool that we have developed that we can help, look at the analytics and look at who's searching for things and who's buying certain trends and what the pricing should be and how all that works. And so you can kind of figure out, do the bill materials, do the engineering costs, all that, with your final product going to give you enough margin to actually go forward or not? If it's on somewhere like Shopify, that really is going to depend on how much dollars in marketing and what analysis is out there to help kind of find complementary products to go to market with that. But at the end of the day, I think regardless if you use our system or use someone else's system, product development is really time consuming and really expensive. And so your first step should always be to validate the opportunity in some form or fashion. So whether you do that yourself, whether you do that with a system or a product or data, you should do that, because again, it only gets more intense and more sophisticated and more challenging once you get past that research part. And again, if you're thinking about products that are injection molded, so plastics and metals, or including electronics, that's where the development costs get much more expensive, and the research is probably the cheapest and least time consuming part of that process. So it makes a lot of sense to do all that research and have conviction before you start spending the bigger costs, which are getting, the product launched, and then this probably the largest cost, which is can you fulfill inventory for not only just the first purchase, but the second purchase and the third purchase. So that's where it starts to add up from a cost perspective.
Right. So you want to think about that from the very beginning, whether or not, that is a viable product, and how much, I always ask in our process, in our concept to launch process, we talk about how much manufacturing is required and what is your manufacturing process. So we always try and encourage folks to learn their manufacturing process. Of course, they don't have to be an engineer, but they should learn about the process. They should learn about the materials, and they should know how much manufacturing is required before they get into a product. And of course, validating the idea first. So before I interrupted you, you were talking about how people come to you and they have, product ideas, and you're working with them, with different engineers, with different teams, kind of trying to move the project forward. And so I'll let you please continue with your product development process.
Yeah. So once that team is developed, then depending on the product, it's going to go into kind of that first ideation phase, which is more of, doing research in the market, patent searches, making sure that, what you're trying to set out to do, again, is not going to infringe anything that's already out there. Then going into concepting, which is more sketches and, lo-fi renderings and stuff like that. And then once you, again, for like an injection molded item, that's where you can start playing around with like the form factor and understanding, what pieces, if you're adding electronics, that can fit where, and that's where the engineering kind of comes in. So the first phase is really just conceptualizing and research. The second phase, goes more into like the actual engineering of it. And then the third phase is, finalizing everything that you need to go, which we call the DFM stage. So you're starting to engage factories. You're starting to understand what their capabilities are. If there's things that you need their help with engineering wise, you kind of help get them involved, get them excited about, launching this product with you, and then they might put their time and effort into it as well. And so we typically at a high level. Yeah.
I love that you do that, so it sounds like, a lot of us, when we have ideas for products, we don't do as much development up front. I think it's often hard for people to find good engineers. I've got, or product designers, things like that, people who are certified in DFM, design for manufacturing. So I love how you're taking the time to really develop the product first, to really think through all of the aspects of the product and how it will work. And that way, by the time you get to the factory, you get to the point where you're talking to the factory and finding a good manufacturing partner, you already know what that product is going to be. I think a lot of people have an idea for differentiation, but they kind of skip development,
right?
And they just go straight to a factory and say, "Hey, I want to put this handle here. I want to change this color here. Like, what should I do?" Right? And often they get charged even a lot more because the factory goes, "Oh, this takes development. Like, now we're gonna have to, put a lot more into this," and so they don't get the pricing that they need because they're not really taking the time to understand the development of the product. Do you have any recommendations for especially brands that are newer and are just starting out wanting to differentiate a product? And do you have any recommendations for that product development process when you're going it alone?
Going at it alone, that's really challenging. I mean, my advice would be to hire experts and try and get as much expertise into your product as possible. And the shortcuts that you don't avoid in that process are going to pay dividends in the long run. The second thing I would say is, depending on what kind of product you're trying to make, if it is something truly novel, or if it is something that you're just trying to make an incremental innovation, use what's out there as much as possible to help guide you from manufacturability and manufacturing cost perspective. Because again, you could have the greatest idea in the world. Will people pay for it at the end of the day, and can you make your margin? Like that's what matters as well. Like I can create an awesome product, But if I'm underwater from a margin perspective, it won't matter. So,
and that happens to so many people. You know, they have a great idea and they spend a lot of money developing it, and they don't think about, they get into manufacturing and they go, oh, okay, I'm hoping I can sell it for this much. I'm hoping that, you know, and the customer just isn't going to pay it, you know? So I agree 100%. You know, you do have to think of all of those things. You want to hire your experts and stuff up front because that's the firm foundation of the product, but you also want to think ahead, right? And make sure that your margins are going to be there. So what about these, if you have a really innovative product, and maybe you're not, I know you're not a bank, and so maybe you won't have advice here, but I thought I'd ask you anyway, because you do have a lot of resources. So when it comes to a really innovative product that might cost a lot, you of course recommend hiring experts, but some of those experts can be really, really expensive. Do you have any advice there about how to find good experts and also how to fund larger projects?
Well, for hiring experts, you should come to people like you or me. Come to Gemba and we can find them for you. And then as far as funding projects, you know, look, I think there's a lot of, you know, money out there to be given away or earned, or however you want to say it, invested in this space. There's a ton of, you know, angel investors and stuff like that that can help, you know, bring your idea to life. I think if you can put together a really compelling story that maps a lot of what we're talking about, which is the research, you know, trying to de-risk the situation from a cost perspective. So you know, get as far as you can, I guess, into the point of where you need money, and then, you know, use things like, you know, angel investors, use things like Indiegogo or Kickstarter if you need to go that route to get money. See if someone will give you an SBA loan. Like, if you have that conviction, you believe that the product is going to be there from a margin perspective, and if you believe that, you know, this is a really truly something that is going to solve a problem and going to be a hit product, like, go for it. That's my advice.
Yeah, I agree that it's worth it. You know, I started and my product needed molds. My product that started me on this whole journey, it needed molds, and those molds were really, you know, expensive. But I had validated that this was going to be a good product and it was going to be worth it, and I was able to pay those initial expenses off pretty quickly. And so I think, you know, as long as you set up a proper business foundation, and I always tell people, think about what you're building. You know, you're not going to get that money back immediately, but think about what it might be worth, and think about your total addressable market, and, you know, what you could do with your sales there. So as far as manufacturers, you mentioned, Zach, that you guys really source from all over the world. You source from, I think you said, Turkey, lots of different countries. And this is a time when people really are looking to source outside of China. They're really looking to move their manufacturing elsewhere. I have clients that are sourcing from Brazil, that are sourcing from Mexico, that are sourcing from all over Europe, the US. And I'm always so impressed with that. I'm like, yes, where are you finding these manufacturers?
But I mean, in general, our philosophy is that you find someone who's physically in the place you're going to do manufacturing, so you have some sort of representation locally, that you don't have to get on a plane yourself and go there. And then just task them with what you want them to do, right? Like, if you want them to visit the factory and take photos and videos of the production line, do that. You know, I think, again, depending on how large your production volume is, depending on how much money you're going to spend, is going to depend on what kind of factory you're going to work with. If you're just starting out, you know, you're going to be working with a tier 3 factory, and you're just going to have to understand what the challenges are to work with those types of factories. The game is a little bit different than if you go into the tier 2 or tier 1 type of factory, and that's where you want to get to, right? If you can show a successful product, have that traction and get into the, you know, 6-7 figure range of, you know, sales and revenue and all that stuff, then you can level up. But if the expectation is, you know, well, I'm creating a product for the first time and my budget's X, you know, a couple $20,000, $30,000, like, don't expect to go into a tier 1 factory with that kind of budget, because they're only going to talk to people that are doing tens of millions of dollars. And so I think just kind of level setting in general, that's the two things I would say, is find someone locally, and then just like know where you are on the totem pole, and then lean into that, right? Like, it just means there's a little bit extra work that needs to go into it. But at the end of the day, it's a process that I think will help a lot of people, at least from a mindset perspective, understand like what they're going up against, right? Like, you got to be pragmatic about the situation, especially if you're going down this path.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to talk about is I think a lot of people have this unrealistic expectation that the factory is just going to take care of everything. The factory is going to make sure that the products are quality, right? The factory is going to make my product right? And it's really quality control, especially when you're just starting out. It's your responsibility.
Yeah.
It's your responsibility as the brand owner to make sure that your specifications are on point, to make sure that you have quality control processes in place, because when you're working with those lower tier factories and you're really, it's going to fall on you. They're not going to have the infrastructure in place to make sure that everything is made exactly the same, and everything is made exactly to standards. The information that you provide is so important. And I love what you said, Zach, about find somebody who's on the ground there and who can be your eyes and ears, and who can go and talk to the factory for you, who can get samples for you, because not only are you cutting down the time that it's going to take you through production, right? But versus waiting for samples forever and all of that, or but also you're going to increase your likelihood of success by having somebody who's nearby and who can check in on things and see how things are going. I love to, especially with new factories, make sure I'm doing mid-production checks, pre-production checks, make sure everything is good to go, set up, that they understand all of my specifications, mid-production checks to make sure everything's going well before an entire order fails an inspection and I have to remake it, and then of course, post-production before we're shipping anything out. So I love those pieces of advice. The only thing that you didn't give up is, how do we find those people? So if I want to manufacture in Turkey, do I just Google it? How do I find the guy who's going to be the good guy, to help me?
Yeah. I think, again, if you don't go to places like Gemba, you can try LinkedIn, you can try Upwork, you can try a bunch of other, talent network type things. There's agencies in all of those countries where you can try and find people. You're putting a lot of trust in someone you've never met before. So I'd just be careful and make sure that, you have all the proper documentation and contracts in place. And I would say the same thing for factories. A lot of the things that you talked about, QA and what happens if things go wrong, should be in your contract that you have with the factory, no matter what. And if they aren't, then you're playing by their rules. So,
yeah.
And
a lot of people do that. A lot of people don't have any contracts. They don't have conversations with their suppliers. They just kind of like, order something on Alibaba and hope for the best. But
yeah,
it's not usually a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's, again, it could be a good way to get started, but is it sustainable? I don't really think so. I think that differentiation is paramount to succeeding in the product world. What it's on Alibaba, they've done an amazing job of being able to bring catalogs of products and factories to the mainstream public. What they don't do really well is custom, and so that's where you have to really get into the weeds of vetting and testing factories. And the real way you're going to do that is through the sampling process. And they could have all their paperwork in order, they could have all the audits in order, they could do everything that you keep saying yes, 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 yes. You're really not going to know until you get that first sample. And so that's going to be your true test. And you can, I've seen factories that look amazing on paper and even in person, and even when they get down to creating the sample is just poor. I mean, it happens. So you just have to know that that can happen. Always have a backup plan. Our philosophy is to, find somewhere around 6 really good factories to start, narrow it down to 2, and then if you want to narrow it down to 1 from there, that's the best approach. But always have a plan B in case plan A does not go well.
Yeah, I like to have options too, and that's great advice. I usually start by starting with a lot of different options, and I do an initial vetting process where I sit down with, the sales agent, the owner of the factory, and just talk about, hey, where are your, tell me about your factory, tell me about your certifications, tell me about your product and your production process, and all of those things. And I try to see if they can meet my price for a stock product that they already have, and how much they're willing to differentiate or work with me. And I kind of vet them that way. And that's those factories that do well in those initial discussions are the ones that I'll move forward with for a sample. And so it's a little bit, it saves me some time versus having all 6 of them create a sample when I haven't gone through that first round of vetting. So I love the advice that you gave there. It's so important. And the sampling process is so important, as well as having options. So speaking of, of course, Gemba is the answer to every question here, but at what point do you recommend working with a company like Gemba versus going it alone, or, hiring freelancers, that kind of thing?
That's a great question. I think it's going to depend on the complexity of the product and what you're trying to do. I mean, to me, my thought process is just like a business owner or entrepreneur is, if it's not my expertise, hire it out. So if it's not your expertise to do whatever you're trying to do with the product, hire that out. You can try and become an expert overnight with all the resources like Google and everything else that's out there. But in reality, there's someone out there that, again, if time is your most valuable asset, which is my firm belief, where can you be spending your time elsewhere in your business or your product that is something that you actually are, some of your core strengths, and the other part of it that, actually building the product or creating a collateral. If you're not technical in that sense, go hire someone to do that. It's just going to drive everything forward at a much more efficient and faster pace.
Yeah, that's definitely it. I mean, we could get stuck doing every step of the business ourselves, but if we want to build our business at a scale, and especially, the product business is a scale game.
Right.
You do need to scale. You can have one really great product and make good money, but ultimately you need to keep going in order to scale and cover your overhead expenses and stuff, unless you're going to make up for it with extreme volume, of a really great product. But yeah, I mean, so speaking of scaling, what do you recommend for brands that want to scale their business with new products? Like, do you have any recommendations for best practices for scaling and how to look at that?
Yeah, I think there's really two approaches to that question. There's one, which is, I want to be very particular about my brand, and I'm only going to set out products that, I associate with my brand. And I think that's where, doing the research and seeing what else is out there can help give you inspiration on what that product could be, and then looking at data to validate it. And then there's the other approach where it's just like, I just want to create products and get them out there as fast as possible, regardless of what they are. And they don't have to be associated like just in the, workout space or just in the apparel space. Like, I can just put out whatever I think is going to sell. And in that case, it's just much harder. I think it's much harder to execute because you're going to need expertise across a variety of different niches, which again, you can hire for, but it can be more complicated in that sense because you're not really focused on one thing. So either way, I think the best thing you can do is look into, tools or look into services that can help with the research side of things, help you validate what you're going on, then use, some sort of qualitative analysis, which is kind of like the part that isn't going to be in the data, to really understand like where the design is going to head and what the product inspiration really is, to tell the story with the product. So, again, what's the end goal of what you're trying to solve? What's out there in the market already? What are you going to change about it? Or what are you going to make better about it? And how do you look at reviews of what currently is out there and engineer or create what is going to fix those problems, to make an awesome product?
Awesome. Good advice. So, what do you think makes the right manufacturer for your product? So, when you're looking and vetting your suppliers and looking at different manufacturers and trying to make a decision on one, what do you think are the most important things to pay attention to?
Yeah. Another great question. So again, this is going to be very dependent on what kind of product you're baking. There's certain categories or certain materials that, there's only going to be a certain subset of factories that are going to be good partners for you. Like if you're talking about baby products or FDA regulated products, your search gets much more narrow once you start putting in those types of requirements. So step one would be to understand your product requirements from a regulatory perspective or from the materials perspective, and narrow your search from there first, because you're going to filter out a ton of noise that isn't going to be relevant to what you're doing. And then step two, I think, is looking at their capacity and understanding where you can go at scale with this factory. If you're doing injection molding, you're going to want to understand, at what point the mold will break, at what point the mold gets out of capacity, or what the capacity is per month of that mold, so you can put that into your financial forecast. And then I think, so that's kind of, again, the hard requirements, more of the operational requirements. And then I think, all of the documentation on audits and everything is going to also narrow it down, because there's only going to be a certain amount of factories that have the proper documentation that is, again, required for not just the product, but from a safety or regulatory perspective. There's a lot that just don't do it, and that's a decision that they make, and maybe that's just where they are as a factory. But having all those things in order, I think, will narrow the search down a lot. And then once you've done that search, again, from afar, my recommendation is always to have someone physically go there and be your eyes and ears on the ground to truly vet who it is. I think a lot of people who maybe are just starting out, or even have started out and been successful, undervalue the relationship that their manufacturers play in this equation. I mean, outside of your customers, they're probably your second most important asset to the team. They're the ones that are making your product. The customers buy and give you feedback and help you iterate on your product. The manufacturers have to be bought into that as well. And so I would say, like, building the relationship, a really strong relationship that's beneficial on both sides, having really good communication with your factories after you've done all that vetting, and then having someone who can physically be there to show that you're taking it serious too, I think is just really important throughout this process. And again, they're going to start treating you different. If you're the company that goes and visits them every month and has dinner and focuses not just on the business but treats them like humans, like they are, come Chinese New Year time, or come prioritization time on the production line, they may choose to work with you more than one of their big guns, because look, you treat them better. So money talks, it goes a long way, but it's not all of it. So that's at least what I believe.
I absolutely love that advice. I can't say enough how valuable your partnership. It's a partnership. Really, your manufacturer is your partner in this business. And I completely agree. If you can, I realize right now it's not easy.
It's crazy.
It's not easy. And they know that too.
You'd be surprised. A lot of them have Zoom now. I mean, a lot are doing the things that you need to be doing in this, remote type of work. All over the world. It's not just in China. I mean, all over the world, people are starting to adopt this new, business sense where they need to be on virtual calls and stuff like that. So,
right.
that might be part of your criteria too, is are they willing to hop on a Zoom call and talk to you and meet you? Like if they
Yeah.
aren't, then maybe you might want to think twice about working with someone who won't hop on a call with you, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just up to you. But I would want to meet someone that I'm going to be spending that kind of money with. Just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I like to always, I like to visit. And if I can't visit, then we always get on calls. But I like to remind them that I can't wait to visit,
Yeah.
because I want them to know that the relationship means something to me and that I value what they bring to the table and their input and everything. And to me, it's more of like, how are we working together,
Yep.
to make this work. So
Yeah.
love that advice. All right, I have one more question about manufacturers. This is a
Sure.
tough one.
Okay.
What do you recommend when you have a product that requires multiple manufacturers? How do you navigate that?
In what sense do you mean? So, like, for example, we have a packaging factory that we work with, or a few packaging factories that we work with. So you could say technically, like, the assembly factory and the packaging factory are two different factories. Um, if you're talking about just like in a general sense, like what does it mean to have a diversified supply chain where you have, maybe an injection molding factory that does all the, plastic work, and you have an electronics factory that does all of the, hardware support for that. Like how does that work into the equation? Is that
Yeah, I
more of
think
what you're
it's
asking?
very common for people to have packaging separately,
Right.
but I think when you have, for example, a metal product that has a plastic component, or like you were saying, an
Right.
electronic component, I know, in our program, we teach that you should always have a lead factory that you're kind of working
Yep.
with, and that should be the factory that is making the most important, prominent components of your product. And they should be kind of putting it together there. And then packaging, that's okay if they're not, but that's what we focus on. But I'm just wondering if you have any other advice for people working with multiple factories.
Yeah, I think if that goes into if that's a the type of product that you have, which are a lot of products out there, that's going to require multiple factories to be touching your product. I mean, even you'd be surprised, again, even if you're doing a cut and sew product, like there's some mill or some factory that's probably going to make some component of your product. Like for
Mm.
jackets, a jean jacket, if they have a zipper, zippers are made at a different place, like YKK or something like that, right? So I think the big thing is to just know who you're working with. Again, if you can just get the level of transparency from your assembly factory to understand who their partners are, not in a sense of I'm trying to undercut you, but just more of a sense of like, who do you work with? And then understand their lead times, because and try to understand like what their buying habits are, and try to understand what their production timelines are. I mean, generally speaking, your assembly factory is going to give you a 30 to 60-day lead time depending on the type of product you have. If you get into electronics, it can be, I mean, again, if you're talking Bluetooth chips, you're talking like potentially months of lead time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it really comes down to just knowing every part of the supply chain and how long the lead times are. I think that's like the biggest part of advice that I can give, is just, if you like, the name of the game in product is to never run out of inventory so you don't have unhappy customers. The second you do, it gets into the cycle of like, I'm panicking to get my product back on. I may have to think of like plan B for all of the stuff I've already had set up, when in reality it's just knowing what the lead times actually are for the products and the downstream operations that are maybe not what your assembly factory focuses on. Again, things like complex electronics, there's only a certain capacity that can be made because it's so complicated. So just know what that is ahead of time. So if you have to go into like twice a year ordering and there's a 6-month lead time, like know that you're going to have that complicated operation, and know what it means to have a 6-month lead time. Like you have to forecast out inventory for 6 months. So just know that up front, and try and play that puzzle game of like, when do I need to order inventory so I don't stock out, versus how do I maximize my warehouse space so I don't overpay? And it's hard. I mean, that's why this stuff is hard. But it's something that, again, if you don't have the expertise for, hire someone to help you with that, or get software that can help you kind of forecast all those things out, build an Excel model, whatever it is for you to at least get to that point of like complete scale. Just do whatever it takes.
That's
Or
awesome.
just do like me and drop a container in your backyard, right?
Right. I mean, whatever it takes, man. Like we've all been there.
So
Yes.
Zach, I would love to get into the meat and potatoes of, because this is, once again, I'm always selfish on these shows, but I don't care because I know other people are learning too. But when you were starting and running your business, what were some of the personal challenges that you pushed through, and also, how did you come up with your systems for the business, and how did you integrate them, especially with this like remote workforce that so many companies are now, um, you know transitioning into?
Yeah, great questions. I think starting out for me, not coming from the manufacturing space, was learning as fast as I could what that actually meant, the challenges that come with finding good suppliers, and things go wrong, and how to make sure that when they do, what's your plan, what are you going to do next, and so kind of embodying that through the company and making sure that our customers know that if something does go wrong, we have their back, and we're going to make sure that it gets taken care of. So I think that was, a learning experience early on that continues to be a learning experience for whoever gets into the space, regardless if you're a customer, if you're new to the space. Just anticipate that things are going to go wrong, and it's just how do you pull yourself up when that happens. Um, I'm sorry, what was the second half of the question?
Just like systems and processes. So, with the
Yeah,
remote workforce, which I'm sure a lot of your workforce is, what does your day look like in terms of like coordination with them, systems and processes in place that kind of help you
yeah.
stay organized?
Um, I think we've built out a system, both internally and using some external software that helps kind of keep track of everything. You're right. I mean, we're now operating in, I think, 8 or 9 different countries, and so making sure, maybe even more than that now, with including our engineering team. Um, but yeah, I think from our perspective, we have an all hands meeting on the first Wednesday of every month to kind of set the tone for the month, and then we have you know management level management level that is helping kind of drive the OKRs and the KPIs for the month, and the quarter and the year, and then just making sure that everyone has what they need to really succeed at their job, and the role that they play, and giving praise, and making sure that everyone feels like the value that they're providing to a company is really worth the squeeze. I think that's the most challenging part about in general building a business, is continuing to make sure that everyone in the company has their say, and feels like they're empowered to do their work, and do it professionally. So I think that the system we've set up is really just to empower the people that are working here to do their job, be vocal, and give feedback as soon as they can when things go wrong, and fix whatever the holes are as fast as they can.
Awesome. So, in terms of that kind of overreaching, going to an overreaching theme here of, what do you think your goals are for 2021? Like, what, as a company, as personal goals, anything like that? I know that you have a little one. Any personal or business goals that you're really shooting for 2021? And where do you see the e-commerce market going in 2021?
Yeah. Also very good questions. From a business standpoint, I think just continue the momentum we had from 2020 into 2021. At the growth rate we have, continued to operate on that growth trajectory. And then personally, I think it's just continue to be a good dad, and be a good husband, and good dog dad as well, and hopefully get some new sense of normalcy as COVID comes down, and be able to really have my little girl meet the rest of her family, because she hasn't really been able to do that yet. That'd be a great thing to accomplish this year.
Awesome. Yeah, the lack of travel is pretty brutal. my dad still lives in Hawaii, and they're the strictest. And so, like, trying to get a
Yeah.
family of five out there is not going to happen. So hopefully we'll get him to visit here soon. The other thing I love to
Do they have
ask,
like a 2 week mandatory
they
quarantine
do.
like
You
as
have
soon as you
to,
get
yeah, I
there?
guess you have to get a
Okay.
test before you get on the airplane. When you get off the airplane, they're the strictest state in the entire country when it comes to COVID protocols and things like that. So yeah, that's been pretty brutal. Whereas, I live in a state where they're like, you're fine, go out and do what you want.
Well, I live in a state where they just lifted the mask ban, so I think it just depends on where you live
Same,
and and
yeah,
and
same
and
here.
whatever
Yeah,
it is like.
that
But
actually went away. Yeah, about a month ago now. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, it's interesting. And I'm a data guy, so I'm going back and looking over all the data, and there's some pretty interesting stuff there. I encourage everyone to do that. Um, but the other thing I love is, I'm always, most entrepreneurs are this way, so I'm sure you're this way. You're always consuming new content in terms of books, audiobooks, podcasts, business, leaders, things like that. Before we started, you were talking about Clubhouse. Anything else that you're kind of dabbling into right now to kind of level up in terms of business or life?
um, I've been really fascinated with um, just the whole crypto space lately. This whole NFT madness that's going on, I can't understand it, but it's just I can't take my eyes off of it. Like every day, I see these crazy things going on Nifty Gateway and NBA Top Shot, where they release these, moments, or they release these, design collabs between some pretty cool artists and some pretty cool musicians, and they sell for insane amounts of money. And then the secondary market, they sell for even more. So I don't know what's going on, but it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it has been interesting. I know that, like, every day I've been like pulling up my crypto account, being like, oh, 10 grand up today. Oh, 20 grand down. Like, it's just like this huge, like, crazy
Yeah,
roller coaster. But it's fun once again too. Yeah, I used to, for a while there, I was day trading as a hobby back when I was doing apps, like, quite a few years ago. And the data and the tools nowadays, it's almost like cheating if you know if you like know what to do. That's why
yeah,
when with all the AMC and GameStop and all that, I started laughing because I'm like, so if you did a little more due diligence, you would have realized that, like, the quote unquote tools that people are using to cheat are available to everyone, and you just have to, like, go out and find them. There's crypto bots, there's all these things that look at, like, hundreds of data points and can predict fairly accurately now when to buy and sell, and things like that. So it'll be interesting, I think, as it gains more acceptance, that people are going to kind of wake up to some of those tools and bots, and interesting ways of exchanging between crypto exchanges for the arbitrage and stuff like that. It's
yeah,
all kinds of fun stuff. It is a fun thing to dabble in. I agree, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So let people know, Zach, where they can find you. You've talked about your company, so I'm pretty sure they know that. But website, email, LinkedIn, wherever you want people to connect with you, let them
Yeah.
know. Clubhouse.
Feel yeah, feel free. I got to start dabbling in Clubhouse apparently. But
Yeah.
feel free to. I've got one who's a very big promoter with Amy, and one who's kind of against it with Andy, which is funny.
Well,
Nice
and I love
dynamic
it. It's
there.
just,
Yeah.
once again, it's like
One more thing.
only so many hours in the day.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I mean, if you have an idea, you can feel free to go to Gembah.com. That's GEMBAH.com, and fill out a form, and someone from our team will be in touch with you. If you want to get in touch with me, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. Happy to chat with you about anything you need. And um, yeah, looking forward to meeting some of your audience and hopefully helping you with some awesome products.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach. Really appreciate you being on. And if you need any daddy tips, like I said, I'm on version 3.0 right now, so I can
I will
definitely
take
tell
you
you.
up on that.
Yeah, I had a buddy who had a kid about a year ago now, and I gave him some tips, and he was like, "Man, I told him how when we used to get up at night, with the first kid, we'd turn the light on, And, they do all this thing. And then by the second kid, we're like, no, you get one of those salt lamps and you just put it as low as possible so you can change your diaper. Like there's all these little things that when
Yeah.
that nobody tells you, that when you finally get, into your second or third kid, that you're like, you finally got the hacks, right? It's just like,
Yeah,
your business, right?
I'm still very much in the MVP stage with the
Yeah.
7-week-old and learning as much as I possibly can. So
All right. Well,
yeah,
take
it's been
you
fun.
could take the salt lamp tip as your first one. Go buy one
Perfect.
of those with the ones that have the dimmers. Put it at the changing table, so when you get up at night to change, you keep the lights as dark as possible.
Yep.
The other great one is a yoga ball, right? You just bounce on a yoga ball at night when they can't sleep, and that's another pro tip there. So.
I know my next 2 purchases.
All right, Zach. Well, hopefully they help. Let me know. Email me and let me know how that goes, or if you
Oh,
have any.
I'm gonna send you me bouncing on a ball with that light on
I
and at
love it.
2 in the morning.
I love it. I'll post it if you do. I promise.
All right. I'm holding you to it.
All right. Hey, thank you so much, everyone who joined us live in the Zoom meeting. We really love having you guys here to ask questions. That really makes our day to see that you guys want to join us. We really appreciate that. If you have not yet, if you're listening on any of our social channels or on the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe. We really, really appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. And if you want to join us, remember it's 1 p.m. Pacific time every Tuesday, and we'll see you next time on the Seller Roundtable. Thanks, Zach.